Welcome back to the Deep Dive. This is where we really get into the weeds on fascinating topics, trying to pull out those insights you need to feel, well, truly well-informed. Today, we're plunging into, I guess you could say, the wild world of online fashion aesthetics. Kind of overwhelming, right? All those hyper-specific style labels, they seem to define not just what you wear, but who you are, or at least who you are online. And we're talking about the explosion of the core phenomenon. It's like a whole new language of style that's just sprung up. So our mission today, it's not just about listing what's trending. No, we want to explore what these trends actually tell us about, how we build our identities, how we connect, or maybe disconnect from each other. And what does it even mean to have personal style these days? In this super fast-paced digital world, we've got a really rich mix of sources to guide us: fashion glossaries, deep sociological studies, even some really raw personal thoughts from people on social media forums. Should be quite the journey. Okay, let's begin to unpack this.
Yeah, and what's really striking right off the bat is just the speed, the sheer velocity, how quickly these seemingly simple labels, these cores, have become so central to how we see ourselves and how we see others. Often we just kind of adopt them without really thinking about the bigger picture, the cultural stuff, the psychological side. We've seen this corification of everything, as some people are calling it. It's really hit a peak recently. It just underscores how fast digital trends move now and how deeply they affect fashion, sure, but also our sense of identity, our very sense of self. It feels like more than just trends changing fast. It's like a fundamental shift in how we present ourselves, maybe even how we think about authenticity.
You've absolutely hit on something critical there. And I think to really get our heads around this, we need to go back a bit. Where did this whole core suffix actually come from? Because it wasn't always like this, was it? Our sources point to normcore popping up around, 2014? What was that exactly? And who was behind it?
That's a great place to start, yeah. Normcore. It was actually coined by a trend forecasting group, K-Hole, they were called, founded by Greg Fawn and Emily Segal, millennials, deep in brand consulting. And their idea was actually quite clever, quite specific. They wanted to describe this really unassuming, almost vibeless clothing. It was basically anti-fashion, a conscious choice to just blend in. Comfort, simplicity, not standing out.
Right, like Seinfeld chic, almost. Plain T-shirts, basic jeans.
Exactly. Dad sneakers, that sort of thing. Embracing a kind of comfortable anonymity. But then, and this is where it gets really interesting, according to our sources, Gen Z came along and they just completely ran with it. Their whole existence is tech native, right? Super fast content consumption, TikTok. They took that cause suffix and just blew it up, applied it to everything. It became the default way to label any style, any aesthetic. It's almost like that quote from the Fashionista Glossary says, I guess this is just how we're describing fashion trends now.
Wow.
It stopped being just one trend and became like a whole new way of speaking about style, a linguistic framework.
Yeah, a linguistic framework.
Right.
That's a powerful way to put it. Defining ourselves almost instantly. And you mentioned Gen Z's tech savviness, the rapid content. It feels like that's what fueled this explosion. Boiling down complex ideas, whole subcultures into these single word cores, and it's created this frankly dizzying number of cores, each with its own really specific look and feel. That Fashionista Glossary gives a great snapshot. Can you maybe walk us through a few examples? Like, what are some of the standouts and maybe what they're trying to express?
Oh, absolutely. The variety is just, astonishing. And each one tells a little story. So, for instance, you've got Angel Core. And naturally, it's opposite, double core. Angel core is all about purity, innocence, this ethereal beauty, draws a lot on celestial imagery, classical stuff. Think soft, flowy fabrics, pastels, pinks, whites, light blues, and elements like clouds, feathers, wings, halos, cupids. It kind of speaks to this desire for lightness, maybe, divine grace, an escape from the chaos.
Like an Instagram filter aesthetic, but in real life.
Sort of, yeah. And then devil core is the stark opposite. A rebellion against that. It embraces darkness, rebellion, even sort of sadistic pleasure themes. Visually, you see satanic motifs, barbed wire, lots of red and black, chokers, dark makeup. Edgy silhouettes, a statement, right? Embracing the shadow side or finding power in defiance. These two side by side, they really show how these cores let you signal contrasting identities really quickly, really clearly.
That's a fascinating contrast. And then completely different. You mentioned ballet core. Fashion's always borrowed from ballet, but this seems deeper.
It really leans into the ethereal, graceful, almost disciplined side of it, yeah. You see the leotards, the delicate tooties, floaty skirts, wrap sweaters. Ballet flats, obviously.
Yeah.
Tea-length dresses. It evokes the sense of delicate art, disciplined beauty.
It feels like it's tapping into a desire for timelessness, maybe.
Mm.
In a world obsessed with what's next. It's like romanticizing this very specific, graceful aesthetic.
Precisely. It's a curated nostalgia almost for kind of perceived purity, physical perfection, and then jumping completely.
Barbie core.
Oh boy, Barbie core. Right.
Mm.
This one is pure, girly, mainstream aesthetic. Rooted in the icon, obviously, especially that late 90s, early 2000s Barbie vibe. It's just unapologetically pink. Blonde, plastic, sunny, form-fitting, glamorous, almost hyper-real. And it got that massive boost from the Greta Gerwig movie filming shots, didn't it? Suddenly it was everywhere.
You couldn't escape the pink?
Exactly. It became mainstream almost overnight. It's more than just a color. It's like a performance of extreme femininity and maybe optimism.
It definitely felt like a performance.
Okay.
And speaking of things that were everywhere, cottagecore. That really blew up on Instagram a few years back, that whole idyllic rural thing. Shabby chic prairie dresses.
Yeah, the cozy cardigans, the barn weddings aesthetic, living off grid. But it's important to note, as our sources do, it got some valid criticism early on for romanticizing, maybe oversimplifying, even whitewashing this kind of domestic agricultural life that, frankly, most participants didn't know much about.
Right, and maybe ignoring some historical context like colonialism.
There were those concerns, definitely. But like we said, these cores can evolve. Cottagecore has since been embraced by more diverse groups, taken in more progressive ways, and it spawned all these outdoorsy offshoots, country core, farm core, all rooted in that desire to connect with something simpler, more self-sufficient. It shows how these things get reinterpreted.
That reinterpretation is key, isn't it? Shows a deeper need. Okay, what about craftcore? That sounds interesting, sustainability focused.
Yeah, partly driven by sustainability, partly by just a desire to make things. The clothes look like maybe you made them yourself, or you're just really into tactile creation. Think quilt jackets, lots of crochet, knitting, embroidery with nature themes, animals, flowers, bugs, aprons even, and lots of pockets, interestingly. Practicality.
Like Bode or Dauphinette.
Yeah.
Those kinds of brands.
Exactly. They blend that high fashion sensibility with a handmade feel. It speaks to wanting something tangible, rejecting mass production, linking style directly to making.
I like that. And for nature lovers, you mentioned a split. Fairy core versus goblin core.
Yeah, it's a great pairing. Fairy core is exactly what it sounds like. Soft, dreamy, mythology meets nature, elfin details, wings, butterflies, shimmer, braids, flower crowns. Corsets, puff sleeves, light, ethereal, whimsical, escapism maybe, connecting to a gentler, mystical nature.
Okay, so goblin core is not that.
Definitely not that. It's almost the ugly or subversive twin. Still nature and folklore, but way less idealized. It embraces the messy bits, the overlooked parts of the wild. The clothes look a bit tattered, maybe mismatched. Lots of mucky earth tones, brown, dark green, moss. Think frogs, mushrooms, snails, dirt. Finding beauty in the unconventional, the unpolished, raw nature.
Wow, okay. Like a celebration of imperfection.
Exactly. A rebellion against the pristine. Showing beauties in weird places, too.
Okay, and then we have to mention the OG, the one that started it all, normcore.
Right, back to the beginning. The core of all cores, you could say. Like we discussed, it's about unassuming, deliberately vibeless clothes, actively avoiding trends. That uniform looks Seinfeld, dad sneakers, baseball caps, Birkenstocks, fanny packs, simple basics.
It's such a paradox, isn't it? An anti-statement that became a statement.
Totally. Indifference to trends became the trend. And then shifting gears completely, from simple to grand. Royal core.
Ah, yes, the Bridgerton effect.
Definitely fueled by shows like Bridgerton, The Crown, Marie Antoinette, all things European royalty. Opulent colors, luxurious fabrics, those frilly pre-20th century shapes, nip waists, full skirts, ruffles, bows. It even gets super specific with subcategories like princess core, queen core, even knight core with chainmail and stuff.
Knight core.
It's about romanticizing historical power, elegance, stepping into that fantasy of regal life, maybe escaping the mundane.
We're just loving the costumes.
Yeah.
And finally, vacation core. This one feels very internet.
It absolutely is. It taps into that desire to post perfect vacation pics, but crucially without the actual vacation. You just dress like you're wandering through Italy or the south of France. No plane ticket needed.
It's the performance of the lifestyle. Pure aspiration.
Exactly. And this whole whirlwind where, like Fashionista noted, it feels like a new core pops up on TikTok daily. It really highlights the speed, the saturation. But connecting it to the bigger picture, this explosion of super specific labels, it probably points to a deeper need, right? A need for quick identity markers in a world that feels like it's changing so fast, maybe feels overwhelming. It's a way to signal who you are, who you want to be in these easy to digest visual bites, offers a sense of belonging, maybe, even if it's just for a moment.
It is fascinating, this instant labeling. But are we really talking about trends in the old sense? Or is it
Uh-uh.
something faster, more disposable? Our sources make a really key distinction between trends and these microtrends. What's the difference there, and what does it mean for us?
That's a super important distinction, yeah. Getting this is key to understanding what's happening now. So, traditionally, trends, they gain popularity over time, right? And they stick around for a decent while. Seasons, maybe even years. They might evolve, sure, but the core idea lasts. Think denim jeans, trench coats, they're always kind of in. Micro trends, though, they're totally different. They're usually a specific item, an accessory, maybe a very niche style. They blow up incredibly fast, usually driven by social media like TikTok.
Right.
But here's the kicker. They become unpopular just as fast, like maybe a month, 2 months, tops, and then they're considered over. Done. And this super rapid rise and fall, it creates this feeling of disposability, not just for clothes, but for culture almost. It feels fragmented.
Oh, totally. And we've seen those examples fly by. Like, remember that green swirly dress?
Hmm?
The Hockney dress by House of Sunny?
Oh, absolutely. During
Yeah.
the pandemic, right?
Right. Yes. It was everywhere online. The symbol of lockdown chic or something. They sold out twice. Took pre-orders. Everyone who was anyone seemed to have it. And then, poof, weeks later, the TikTok buzz moved on, the algorithm changed, and the dress was just gone, abandoned.
Yeah.
It perfectly shows how huge, but how incredibly brief these microtrends are, in 1 minute out the next.
That dress is the perfect example, yeah. And this crazy churn is mostly down to platforms like TikTok, Instagram. They're the engine. They drive what some people call micro-individuality, basically pushing these hyper-specific aesthetics as the way to express yourself. Now, on the plus side, this can actually spark amazing creativity. You see people doing really cool, unique stuff with fashion, home decor, even stylized daily routines, all tagged with hashtag cottagecore or hashtag clean girl aesthetic or whatever. It encourages people to explore different sides of themselves, try things out, experiment with identity, even if it's fleeting. And importantly, it helps people find these super niche communities. That sense of belonging, finding your people online across geographical lines, that can be incredibly powerful and valuable, especially if you feel a bit isolated offline.
Right. That sense of finding your tribe digitally, that's undeniably a positive thing. It connects people. But
Yeah.
it sounds like there's a definite downside to this hyper-personalization.
Yeah.
What are the pitfalls? The hidden costs when our identity gets so tangled up in these fleeting aesthetics?
Yeah, you've hit it. While the belonging part is good, the pitfalls are pretty significant. For one thing, this constant push towards hyper-specific aesthetics, it can actually be really limiting, the pressure to fit the rules of an aesthetic perfectly. It turns self-expression, which should be fluid, into this rigid performance. People get so focused on how they'll look, how it'll appear in a photo, that their identity becomes just a surface thing, a visual snapshot, buzzwords, not real personality depth.
So less about who you are and more about crafting how you appear.
Exactly, which leads straight to the second problem, superficiality. Social media algorithms, fundamentally, they promote trends over substance. They reward conformity. So if you fit the aesthetic well, you get rewarded. If you don't quite fit, you can feel excluded, unseen, maybe even like you're not good enough. It chips away at genuine self-worth. And thirdly, there's this relentless pressure for constant reinvention.
Right. Keeping up.
Yeah, the internet moves so fast, you feel like you have to constantly change yourself to match the latest fleeting trend just to stay relevant. It's this exhausting churn. Depth, long-term connection, they often get sacrificed just to keep up. And you see it affecting creators who feel this huge pressure, and audiences too, just feeling drained by it all. It's like a hamster wheel, which brings up that big question. If your self-expression is basically dictated by an algorithm, if you're always chasing the next look, how authentic can it really be? Is there any belt in there?
That's a heavy question, yeah. Performing for an algorithm instead of exploring yourself. And it leads us right into this idea of dressing the self. It sounds so powerful, but maybe a bit intimidating, like our clothes are doing more than just covering us. Our sources talk about a deep sociological view here, right? How fashion and identity are woven together.
Oh, absolutely. A really relevant idea here is symbolic interactionism. came about in the 60s, mostly. Basically, it's about how we create meaning through social interactions using symbols. And when you talk symbols in this context, dress, appearance, they're absolutely key, central to building identity, developing our sense of self. So fashion isn't just practical, it's a core part of self-presentation. Like, we're all personal technicians, crafting our identity. It's a tool we use to play different social roles, show different sides of ourselves to others, friends, family, strangers. Fashion can be like a shield, protection, but also a really powerful way to create and maintain social identity. It's a language. We learn about ourselves through it, and others learn about us. Joanne Entwistle, a sociologist, wrote back in 1990. She put it really well. Ultimately, dress was one of the key ways in which we all defined ourselves and others. It was, among other things, a powerful form of social discourse.
Wow.
It's not just what you wear, but what it silently communicates. Age, class, gender, job, even your mood.
So it's this constant, quiet conversation we're having. Like that teacher our sources quoted, saying their family's clothes show their personalities. Suit and boots or jeans and trainers to show that we are relaxed instead of saying relaxed. Yeah, that's such a brilliant, simple example. The clothes are the message, no words needed.
Precisely. It shows how we're both sending and receiving these messages through dress all the time. And this subtle back and forth, that's what gives us that feeling of connection. Or if the message isn't received or understood, maybe profound loneliness. It's this subtle but powerful link between the personal and the public. Now, traditionally, figuring out who you are, your identity, that happened mostly face-to-face. Interactions with peers, family, elders, rich, complex stuff. But the pandemic, it shoved so much of that online. And online, like we've said, algorithms are often controlling the social niches, the content we see. This has really changed how we learn culturally, how we define ourselves, especially for young people at that crucial identity forming stage. One source talks very candidly about identifying as, quote, dark academia, old money core girly, but then realizing that feeling of belonging was fleeting. It wasn't a real community, a real identity. And this personal insight points to a bigger issue our sources call pseudo-identity creation. The idea is that identity isn't about real exploration anymore or rebellion. It's more about filling a void created, arguably, by late-stage capitalism.
Pseudo-identity creation.
Wow.
So it's like we're not just buying clothes, we're trying to buy a personality off the shelf.
Right.
Or at least one that looks good online.
Exactly. Which brings us to this really critical concept, market competitive identity development. Basically, the very human process of figuring out who you are, your identity, values, place in the world, it's become deeply tangled up with our economic system, especially under late-stage capitalism. We're bombarded with messages tying capitalism to our lives, and it subtly makes us build our identities around consumption, not intrinsic values or real connections. Take that old money core aesthetic again. The appeal isn't really about community, shared history. It's about buying clothes that look like old money, projecting an image through stuff.
Right, performative wealth.
It's inherently individualistic, materialistic, and the sources highlight that it often leaves you feeling empty, lonely, precisely because it's not about real community or genuine self-discovery. It's a trap, really, a consumerist treadmill pushing you further into capitalism, not towards connection or self-understanding. And what's fascinating is how fashion, which used to signify maybe unique personality or group solidarity in subcultures, now, for many, it's just this performance, driven by algorithms, by market forces, and it's leaving people feeling less connected, not more. It's a fundamental shift.
That really hits home that hollow feeling of chasing aesthetics, performing for this invisible audience. And it leads us straight to the engine driving all this fast fashion. It feels like TikTok microtrends and the fast fashion industry are locked in this symbiotic, maybe even parasitic relationship, feeding each other.
We're talking about a system that pumps out styles incredibly fast with a massive environmental footprint. Who's actually winning in this super fast cycle? You're spot on. Their relationship is totally intertwined. TikTok microtrends are described as both a cause and effect of capitalism. They're directly feeding the behemoth of fast fashion industries. And this industry runs on a timeline that's just insane compared to even a few decades ago. Fashion delivery has to be immediate now. Complete stock turnover every, 6 weeks maximum. It's not seasonal anymore. It's almost weekly.
Wow.
The speed means clothes are designed, made, shipped, and then inevitably thrown away at an alarming rate. The whole business model is speed, volume, low prices, which usually means cheap materials, and often, though our sources focus less on this, exploitative labor, but the environmental impact is huge.
And the sheer amount of waste is just mind-boggling. Our sources mentioned 40 million tons of clothing per year discarded globally. And put it personally, the average American throws away 37 kilograms. That's like 81 pounds of clothes every year.
Yeah.
That's a mountain of textile waste. Clothes barely worn, maybe still tagged, ending up in landfills, incinerators. It's disposable culture-made fabric.
It really is. And this brings us to a crucial layer underneath it all: class, taste, and access. Fashion has always been a way to signal class, right? A visible marker of where you stand socially. Take taste. Seems subjective, but it often functions as a class indicator. Our sources mention the argument that working class people have the real, rather basic taste, while people belonging to the middle or upper class display a rather more cultivated and acquired one. Whether you agree or not, it shows how deep these class ideas run in style. And there's that clear line between high fashion, haute couture, catwalks, exclusive boutiques, and everyday fashion, what people actually wear. Even if high fashion looks laughable or ridiculous to most people, within that elite world, its fashionability isn't questioned. It exists in its own bubble of cultivated taste. And for people trying to move up socially, there's often this impulse to buy things associated with the people they aspire to be like, their potential or wished-for social superiors, because those items seem to carry a superior aura, status by association.
So it's not just does this look good, but what does this signal, even if it's aspirational? A visual shortcut for wanting to climb the ladder. And that ties right into who gets access, right?
The opportunity. Exactly. What we like, what we buy. It's shaped by access or the lack of it. Maybe teenagers today can get fashionable labels more easily, often via fast fashion, than teens in the 1940s could. But crucially, the underlying fabric of society has retained its integrity throughout time. Meaning, despite all the surface changes, the fast trends, social inequality sticks around, the system that creates those divisions, it largely stays the same, even if the clothes change. Which raises that really big, probing question. Is fashion really a unifier? Does it create this fellowship of the individual, letting anyone express themselves and connect? Or is it mostly a divider, perpetuating class lines, maybe condemning people to this endless Sisyphean struggle against instability in a society that worships commodities?
That's heavy.
The fact that social inequality is so persistent, despite fashion constantly changing, it makes you wonder, like our sources suggest, if things always change, but even so it seems in the end they always remain the same. Is there this fundamental structure that just keeps replicating itself, using fashion as one of its markers?
That's a truly sobering perspective.
Right.
That beneath the churn, the core dynamics might not be changing much at all. But it does feel like there's a growing pushback, right? A countercurrent against all this relentless consumerism and superficiality. Our sources point to a kind of surprising shift, especially among Gen Z. A conscious stepping away from constant engagement, from smartphones, from social media. And it's not just casual, it's because they're feeling the negative impacts. Mental health, well-being.
Yeah.
It feels like people are actively choosing to disengage, seeking more balance, more meaning.
This is definitely a significant cultural shift we're seeing, and it seems to be gaining steam. You hear a lot from Gen Z about increased anxiety, depression, stress, linked directly to that relentless stream of notifications, social comparisons, the pressure to maintain a digital persona. And as a result, yeah, you see this tangible trend towards digital detoxes. Even, surprisingly, a comeback for dumb phones.
Really? Dumb phones?
Yeah. Studies are showing declines in social media engagement among teens, people actively choosing to detox, delete accounts. It seems to stem from this deep desire to reclaim time, mental energy, and foster real offline relationships that feel more authentic, less like a performance.
And it's not just kids feeling this pull away. We're seeing tech folks, people in the industry, doing the same thing, switching from fancy smartphones back to basic phones, just calls and texts. Not for nostalgia, but deliberately.
Right. It's a conscious strategy to increase focus, be more productive, get mental clarity back, free themselves from the constant pings, the addictive scroll, taking back control. And this pushback also shows up as this broader move towards authenticity over aesthetics. People are actively turning away from that super polished, overly curated look that dominated Instagram for so long, or those endless haul videos that just push more buying. Instead, there's this growing hunger for authentic home movie style content,
Like Bereal.
Exactly. Bereal is mentioned as an antidote to things like Facetune, promoting raw, unedited glimpses of life. No filters, no pressure. Even on TikTok, ironically, you're seeing more raw, unedited videos showcasing everyday moments, personal stories, candid interactions gaining traction. It suggests a real shift away from just selfies and individualistic stuff towards focusing on purpose and connection, building community, sharing useful info, having actual conversations, vulnerability over perfection.
And this search for authenticity seems to fuel a really strong anti-consumption stance, too. There's this incredibly relatable Reddit post we saw, capturing that feeling of being isolated in the consumer capital of the world, NYC in this case. This person struggling to find friends who aren't obsessed with buying gadgets from TikTok for their fading aesthetic, or just talking about celebrity culture and social media beef, just feeling totally disconnected, even surrounded by millions.
That post is so poignant, yeah. It really taps into a frustration many feel. It reminds me of that Terence McKenna quote, "The cost of sanity in this society is a certain level of alienation." It highlights that struggle when consumerism is the way of life, especially in the US, where, like the post says, people have learned to equate branding with personality. And the user's experience in NYC, a city synonymous with fashion, finance, trends, shows how you can feel utterly alone if your values don't match that dominant consumer culture. They describe people buying expensive jackets every season, maybe on stolen credit cards, because luxury items and fashion are literally how important you are perceived to be. It's the cycle where self-worth gets tied to stuff.
So if you reject that, if that's not you,
Mm.
how do you find your people? Thankfully, that Reddit thread actually had some really practical, inspiring ideas, a roadmap for connection.
Yeah, it offered some great pointers for finding authentic community. Things like exploring NYC's anti-corporate consumerism scene, squatted community spaces, anarchist bookstores, community gardens, places built on shared ideals, not just buying things. Volunteering came up a lot, joining clubs, workshops based on shared interests, book clubs, hiking, birding, music, RPG groups.
Things you do together, not just things you buy.
Exactly. Bicycling was mentioned as anti-consumers transport. Buy nothing groups, kava bars for non-alcoholic social spaces, punkercore scenes, places with alternative values. And it really highlighted hobbies that are inherently not about consumption. D&D, crochet, arts and crafts, woodworking with scrap, organic gardening. Activities focused on creation, skill, sharing. It's a stark contrast to disposable goods. Instead, maybe investing in well-made vintage furniture that lasts, even antiques seen as an ethical form of consumption because they last, less environmental impact. This whole movement feels like a maturing, maybe? Shifting focus from surface appearances to honesty, vulnerability, community well-being, directly pushing back against that isolation of consumption-driven identity.
It really feels like an active reclaiming of connection and meaning. Which brings us to reclaiming personal style itself. Because it feels like TikTok, with all that aesthetic pressure, can create this psychological suffocation, as one source put it, where individuality is discouraged, sameness prevails. You're constantly asking yourself, am I doing this to fit in or because I like it? Am I expressing me or just performing for the algorithm? It's an internal battle.
That conflict is so real, yeah. A heavy burden. The pressure isn't just wear this, it's fit the aesthetic perfectly, no room to deviate. It makes true self-expression really, really hard within those lines. But importantly, people are pushing back. There's active resistance. Creators like at Mara Magdalene get mentioned as examples, people who deliberately mix aesthetics and create subgenres for experimentation.
Oh, interesting.
Instead of following the manual, they make unique things, unique combos. They show genuine personality and interest through their choices. It's taking back control, turning consumption into creation.
I love that, creating subgenres. That feels truly creative, truly individual. And then there's this idea of a bigger anti-aesthetic movement.
Exactly, like the frazzled Englishwoman aesthetic.
Okay, tell me more.
Think Bridget Jones, Helena Bonham Carter, Emma Thompson, that kind of vibe. It's called a subversive preoccupation. It explicitly embraces hand-me-downs and imperfect pieces, celebrates a kind of chaotic, eclectic, maybe even dowdy beauty that rejects polished norms. It's about being herself, flaws and all, not conforming. And this is part of a bigger shift. Like in digital thrifting, Vinted apparently overtook Depop, partly because it focused more on just the clothes, not just the brands. It suggests users are shifting towards asking, what do I actually want to wear? Not just what brand looks cool.
That feels like a huge shift, away from external validation back to what you genuinely like,
That's right.
what feels comfortable. So how can listeners take this desire for authenticity and actually apply it? How do you cultivate a personal style that feels truly yours?
Well, there are a few conscious strategies that come up. A big one is asking, before you buy anything, Do I genuinely love this? Will I wear it a lot, or is it just for this fleeting trend? Be honest with yourself. Another really practical tip is the 3-week rule. See something you want, save it, wait 3 weeks, still want it just as much. Okay, maybe it's a conscious choice, if not. Probably impulse, driven by the hype. Saves money, reduces waste.
That's a good one. The cool down period.
Exactly. But the deeper goal is embracing individual fashion as something outside the binaries of what's in and what's out. Being okay owning things that aren't trendy right now but that you love, that feel like you. Someone even suggested don't throw away clothes for 5 years. Just consciously resist the rapid cycle, value longevity. Ultimately, this whole movement is about reconnecting with reality, the tangible world, real human experience. The call to action is simple but powerful. Go outside, touch grass, feel the sunlight, find community. Find or create those third spaces, those offline spaces, beyond home, beyond work, beyond the screen, where you can genuinely explore who you are and build real community. Because at the end of the day, freedom in fashion and maybe in life comes from realizing someone else's authenticity. It can never truly be your own. Your style is your journey.
That's such a powerful grounding takeaway, crucial in our digital age. And building on that, we have to touch on the most concerning part of this aesthetic culture, the really alarming side that our sources warn about quite starkly. This isn't just about clothes anymore. It's about what these aesthetics tell you about your body, your health, your worth, and how it can creep into genuinely dangerous territory.
Yeah, this is where it crosses a very dark line, where aesthetics become obsession and cause real harm. TikTok, especially, is highlighted by our sources as, well, a breeding ground for severe impacts on body image and mental health, particularly for young users. You have things like dysmorphic filters, dead eyes was one example that literally encouraged striving for looks associated with exhaustion and being dangerously malnourished just to fit an aesthetic. That's horrific.
It creates this awful sort of battle of who can suffer the most, whose illness can be the most pleasing to look at. It directly enables, even glorifies, eating disorders by making it competitive, toxic.
Glorifying suffering as an aesthetic, making illness trendy, that's deeply disturbing.
It absolutely is. And certain aesthetics, like the skinny skater boy look, are called out for romanticizing male mental illness, exhaustion, even substance abuse, which is so dangerous, right? It makes serious issues seem cool, desirable, instead of illnesses needing support. And then you have genres like gym talk or what I eat in a day videos. Seem harmless, maybe, but they often push dangerous, disordered ideas. Gym talk can create this pressure that you have to work out constantly to be fit, blurring healthy exercise with compulsion, maybe masking an eating disorder or body dysmorphia.
Right.
What I eat in a day videos often promote the idea that meals have to fit an aesthetic, whether it's healthy or not.
Showing meals with lack any actual nutrition, like joking about Diet Coke and cigarettes for the coquette look, or conversely, pushing this pressure to eat only perfect, often expensive organic food to be skinny, regardless of actual health needs or whether people can even afford it. The source concludes, really bluntly and chillingly, TikTok is a breeding ground for eating disorders. And it reminds us of that fundamental truth. Eating is not an aesthetic. Eating is something that people do to survive. It should not be something that needs to be stylized or performed.
Absolutely.
Which forces us to ask that critical, urgent question. When an aesthetic dictates not just your clothes, but your body, your diet, your basic habits, where is the line between self-expression and actual self-destruction?
That is the crucial question, isn't it? One we all need to grapple with in this visual performative world. So as we wrap up this deep dive, we've gone from understanding these super fast core aesthetics and microtrends, look at their impact on identity and consumption, and explore these counter movements towards authenticity, towards conscious living. The core message, really, for you listening, navigating all this, it's that constant challenge, but also opportunity to figure out what's genuine self-expression versus what's just performance for the algorithm. Finding your own voice in all that noise.
Exactly. That challenge is right at the heart of maintaining personal autonomy today. Cultivating a sense of self that isn't just chasing external validation or the next viral thing. So maybe consider this. In a world where any style can become a core, chewed up and spat out in weeks, what does it actually mean to have a personal style that lasts, something longer than your next scroll? And how might pursuing that kind of enduring personal style, one rooted in who you really are, your values, your actual connections, how might that lead to a deeper, more fulfilling sense of self and maybe even real community, rather than just chasing another fleeting trend?